and welcome to the Psychic Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Justin Tang. Justin is the host of the Get Stung podcast. Get Stung is Justin's mantra, a way of life that is inspired by getting up every single day to challenge your mind, body and soul and to maximize your mental and physical performance. Justin, hello.
Hi, how you doing, Matt?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to share my story with you and your audience.
Well, we are very, very happy to have you. And just for those who are actually who might be looking at the videos, Justin is in his attic in just outside in New England near Boston.
Yep, right in Boston, Massachusetts.
In Boston, Massachusetts. I am in my car outside my flat. It turns out that a daughter who is sleeping is not conducive to podcasting. My wife has jovially but maybe semi-seriously threatened me with death if I wake her up. So I've parked the car next to the wall that faces the Wi-Fi. So I hope no one minds, but you have the glorious scene of my childproof car. Justin, today's goal is to have an open and honest conversation about your mental health journey, to get some insight into the tools and techniques that have helped you and are available and accessible to other people. And by discussing your journey, we hope to share and normalize conversations about mental health, as often people are not alone in these experiences. That sound good?
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Justin, take it away. We'd love to hear about your mental health journey.
Yeah, so I'll definitely get right into the Get Stung and the mantra, but I think it would be good to just have some history about myself and kind of some of the suffering and struggles that I deal with every day and how it kind of all came about. So we can start back into, I would say, March 2019. And this is the year I'm 35 years old. So just kind of give you a reference point. So when I turned 34 years old in March, I was out at a pub having drinks, and I've dealt with my entire life substance abuse problems. And I remember I was out on my birthday with some really close friends and had been drinking quite a bit. And I remember the words that came out of my mouth. They were, I'm depressed. I'm depressed. And I said this multiple times to my friends, and I didn't really realize at the time like what I was saying because I had never said it, but it just came out. And I had, previous to that night or that day, I had been having some, troubles with my relationships, with my wife, at work, struggling there with my career. Just, it seemed like everything in my life was just not going in the right direction. I have a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids. So, that's great. But for myself, I wasn't ever taking care of myself. So I said those words to myself in March of 2019. And I've said this in previous podcasts in my episode. That's the number one thing you have to do to get help, is to accept that you need help and to accept that you have mental health issues. Because I'm pretty sure I've been suffering from mental health for nearly 30 years. And I didn't come to terms with it until I turned 34.
Which is a long time. And when you said that to yourself, I'm depressed, how did that feel?
It was confusing because, it just kind of came out. It just came out. And my friends heard it. People in the pub heard it, and it kind of made them feel uneasy. And it made my friends kind of like be like, are you okay? And I remember I woke up the next day and we had been drinking the whole day. So the next day was a Monday. I couldn't move the entire day. I was hungover, so depressed, called out of work, and I just couldn't move. I couldn't even watch my kids for the day. And that's when I realized what I had said. My friends had sent me some messages asking if I was okay. And at that moment, I was like, man, I can't continue to live like this. This is not good. Like, I need to get help. So I decided to get help. And I had reached out to a local mental health organization here in the Boston area. and I got put on a 3 to 4 month waiting list. So here in the US, there's a heavy demand for mental health, and we just don't
Mm,
have the supply of therapists,
yeah.
and it's a system issue.
So
So I got put on.
there's a big gap in the treatment.
There really is. There
Yeah.
really is. And that's one thing I talk a lot about with my current therapist is just, how can we make the mental health industry better and more supportive of
Mm,
someone who is opening up and wants to get help. So
mm.
I got put on a 3 to 4 month waiting list,
And that's
and
not good. That's not good for your mental health, right?
not at all, not at all. And in the meantime, I had called around to other mental health places. They had waiting lists. Few people didn't call me back. So I was very discouraged.
Yeah.
And I remember I had called into the original place been put on the waiting list, asking for, I was calling almost weekly, like, hey, when am I up? When am I up? When am I up?
Mm,
And they kept on pushing me to like a suicide prevention line number.
mm.
And that is very overwhelming when,
Yeah.
you know, they're pushing you to a suicide prevention line in like an intake mental health, and at that time, I'm like, suicide was never really an option for me.
Mm.
Um, but that kind of made me start thinking like, am I that depressed where I need to, you know, you know, suicide, what this could lead to? So
Yeah.
that was really scary actually. And
Yeah, and it's interesting. You can imagine that in a situation where maybe if you were having suicidal thoughts, or a person who was regularly having those thoughts, that being put in a waiting list to a unknown therapy appointment, which may or may not work, and then being pushed towards a suicide prevention line, you can see how that could exacerbate the issue.
yeah, yeah, and it kind of made me angry to be honest with you. I
Yeah.
was getting mad at the whole system in the mental health industry. And so I ended up just not calling the suicide prevention or anything like that. I just waited and kept calling weekly. And then finally, this was when I originally got on the waiting list. It's March 2019. This is probably July or August. So about 4 months later, I get a call from my therapist. She isn't any longer my therapist, but I have a new one recently. We can talk about that. But in case, she reached out to me, had me come in about a week later to do my initial mental health assessment with her in kind of the intake process for seeing her weekly. And I remember when I went in there, they handed me a questionnaire and ask you a lot of different types of questions, like how often are you depressed? Somewhat, a bunch of
Mm,
multiple choice questions about your mental health. And then you go in and talk with her some more. And at that point, I just opened up and just
yeah.
spilled everything out to her. Um, it was a defining moment in my mental health journey,
Mm.
was getting into that seat because it was so hard to actually get there.
Yeah, which it
And
shouldn't be, should it? It really shouldn't. Like you should. I mean, in my view, and this is why our organisation, our charity, Psychic exists, is that we believe that mental health support should be accessible 24 hours a day, whenever you need it. So,
yes,
in your
I
instance, when you were on that couch the day after, or even when you had admitted drunk that you're depressed, you should have had access to support then. Okay, granted, it would have been maybe better when you were sober the next day,
yeah,
but on
yeah,
that day you should have been able to get access to at least some form of therapeutic support, even
yeah,
something that would allow you just to kind of bear and cope with that waiting time, and to kind of maybe
yeah.
help you and start you on your journey.
No, I 100% agree with that. And to continue with what I was saying about sitting down with mental health therapists. So
Mm,
we did that. So we did that questionnaire and we sat down and chatted for probably half an hour. Like I said, I really laid everything out for
yeah,
her, and then she had diagnosed me. So I was diagnosed with. She had diagnosed me with bipolar too,
mm,
and I was just a little confused by that because it's like you don't even know me. You hear some of my stories. You have a questionnaire. But then just to say I'm bipolar, and in the way it was delivered with no
yeah,
empathy behind it,
yeah,
I was like, and no, not really explaining what the what that illness is.
Yeah.
And my mother has bipolar, and she has bipolar 1, so she experiences like mania and,
Mm,
goes through a lot of challenges and suffering through her own.
mm,
And my symptoms are a bit different, which I can talk about. Um, but so I was being introduced to this diagnosis for
yeah.
myself, and it wasn't fully explained or delivered with empathy. It was more like, you have bipolar 2. Do you want to go see a psychiatrist to, get on medication?
Yeah.
And I was like, my ego's in the way of all of this too. Like,
Mm,
part of the whole mental health journey and getting help and accepting who you are is your ego. You have to let go of your ego. So my ego is still heavily involved in this. I'm like, I'm not bipolar 2, but I felt so bad in that moment that I was like, yeah, I'll do medicine. Like, I'll go see anyone you're recommending.
mm.
I don't know anything better. I just want to feel better. So
Yeah, which is a, and frankly, it's a very brave thing to do, isn't it? I
yeah,
know perhaps for you it was a very obvious thing to do, but I think there's a lot of stigma around mental health still, and I think and I can talk from a guy's perspective, and from yourself as a guy, it it's I find it hard to admit when things are going wrong. I still do, and I talk about mental health stuff on a day-to-day basis, and I think from your perspective as well, like to to take that step is very, very brave, really brave. At the time for you, it might have been the most obvious thing to do. But I just
yeah.
wanted to say that was really brave.
Yeah, and to go on your point there, I mean, there's a huge stigma around men getting help for mental health.
Mm,
We're, from a male perspective, like, we have this ego that we have to be strong, tough, and especially when you have kids looking up to you, like, you have to be strong all the time, and it's not
yeah,
okay to, like, put your shield down and cry or talk about your feelings,
yeah,
talk about your emotions.
yeah.
Be curious about why you feel and why you have to do certain things just
Mm,
because you are a male.
mm.
And those stigmas are heavy in mental health and in getting help. Um,
And it's
so
interesting
yeah,
you say
so
that. It's interesting you say that. Sorry to interrupt, but in terms of a father and child context as well, we're led to believe that actually not showing our feelings, and to our children as well, is that's going to help them. But research shows that just isn't the case. Like if we want to help them, not be stigmatized with mental health and being able to kind of open up and validate their feelings and process their feelings better than we do, then we've got to
yeah,
open up and we've got to be vulnerable. Like it's counterintuitive in our minds, but actually by us being vulnerable, they become more resilient, which I think is fascinating.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, and that's a whole part of the Get Stung mantra is
Mm,
empowering people to be okay with not being okay,
yeah,
and also being okay with asking for help, especially
yeah,
for men,
yeah,
because
yeah.
all those stigmas um and I can be the voice.
Mm,
I'm okay with that for people who do not want to go as public about their mental health,
yeah,
but will open up and talk to close people
yeah,
around them
yeah,
and have those uncomfortable conversations
yeah,
to get the help and support that they need.
yeah.
Um,
Completely agree with you there. Completely agree with you. Just something I wanted to ask was around you mentioned that this happened when you say you're 35 now, it's happened when you're 34. And you said that you realized that, over the last 34 years, you're probably suffering from mental ill health. Like, if you don't mind me asking,
yeah.
what was that progress, from you as a kid through to college, through, school, college, work? What events did happen that did kind of take you on that journey and to that realization that you weren't okay at 34.
Yeah, so I grew up in a pretty broken family.
Mm,
So my father was estranged for much of my childhood, and we have a great relationship now.
mm,
Now that we're older, but he had divorced my mom when I was 1,
yeah,
and he wasn't around too much. And then I have a brother who is my half brother, and who it's a it's my mom's son, so it's on my mom's side,
yeah,
and we grew up together, so we're like, thick and thin brothers,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
we have different fathers, and he doesn't know his father
Right.
at all. and my mom has a father that she doesn't know.
Mm.
So we we grew up with a single mom, and with that, not having a male role model in your early stages of your life where you need that nurturing from a male figure, like I didn't have that. And as I got older, when I was 8, my mom did marry another guy, so he became my stepfather. And being a stepfather is hard. Now that I'm a father, like
Yeah.
back then, I wouldn't think stepfather is hard, but now, like coming in
Yeah.
and the guy took in my brother, myself, and my mom, who were
Mm.
struggling,
Yeah.
on welfare, being very poor. Um, my mom was working 2 jobs and took us into his house, and they were actually together, and so he was there for me pretty much my entire childhood. Um, so I can't respect and love that guy, almost like a father.
Yeah.
And they ended up in my 20s, so they ended up getting divorced, my mom and him. There was
Mm.
a huge traumatic event that happened. My mom got in, and I talk about this in my one of my episodes, in
Mm.
episode 2. She went to prison when I was in my early 20s for 5 years for drugs and a whole bunch of other things, and that
Mm.
was a very traumatic experience. That's
Yeah.
when her and my stepfather got divorced, and
That must
I
be
just
so
started.
hard for you.
Yeah, yeah, and it was, and we lost everything: our house, our cars, our money.
Mm.
And I'm in college at this time. I'm 22, 23 years old, and instead of like coping with it with the right things, I turned to substances
Mm.
and doing a lot of drinking, cocaine, pretty
Mm.
much prescription medicine. I'm not sure if England has the same problems with prescription medication, but over here it's a
It's a
big issue.
crisis. It's a big
It's a
issue, and
crisis. Yeah.
it's something which we don't have over here, and I'm particularly referring to the opioid
Opioid. Yep.
crisis. I've
Yep.
I've watched a couple of documentaries on it, and it just seems pervasive across the US, and like you said, like from your experience, you're someone who has been caught up in that crisis, and I can only imagine that was a really, really hard time for you, really hard.
Yes. Yeah. It was really hard. And in the moment, like you don't think it's hard. You're just in it. Like you're addicted to these substances. And
Mm.
um, meanwhile, my mom is going away to prison for almost the same thing. And here I am doing this, doing those things.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's the way I coped with it. I didn't really have anyone around me to point me in the right direction, or
yeah,
mentors, or guidance, and that's how I dealt with things. And I also surrounded myself in an environment where the people around me were doing the same thing. So that's
yeah.
uh, you get caught in the middle of it. And thankfully, my wife, and I'd mentioned, we met in college. She kind of drew me out of that, and we moved in together. This is in my mid 20s,
Yeah.
and that's kind of when I started kind of distancing myself away from certain environments that are not positive for me. And I mean, I still had my own problems. I still continued to drink, but got away from the harder substances.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, my 20s, like I didn't know I was suffering from mental health, but now that
Yeah.
I am getting healing right now, I look back and I look into those years and I
Yeah.
see the suffering and the hurt.
Yeah.
And I would never, ever in my wildest dreams want to go back
Yeah.
to those moments. I
And
mean,
for
maybe I would like to change some
yeah,
things, but like just saying and thinking about it, it hurts.
but and for those moments, because this is something that I've often thought about when people are involved in substance abuse, addictions. There is there seems to be, and the more conversations I have on these podcast episodes, is that underlying all of these addictions are negative psychologies and negative mental health. So it does seem to me that if, for example, if you are, I think the opioid crisis is slightly different because it's highly addictive. But for example, like you said, those reliance on drugs, on drink, more of the kind of what you would consider the kind of, go down the local pub and, have too much to drink, maybe get some, have some, lines of cocaine. That is a symptom of underlying kind of mental ill health for a lot of people. And there's a lot of kind of policies out there which talk about how to tackle this issue, but fundamentally, if you want to prevent it, it's actually like investing and supporting in people like yourself to not be there in the first place. I assume would help you better say, if you were offered that line of coke, you can go, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, and I can't thank my wife enough for just kind of pushing me to be a better person, because without her, who knows where I'd be right now. And so
was that a chance encounter? Because like you said, like your kind of peer group were kind of participating in the same activities. Like, was that kind of, was that romance a chance encounter, or was it something that you think you actually looked for and said, do you know what? I really like you, but at the same time, I like everything about you that I'm not.
Yeah, I think the way our relationship started was she saw me in that environment, and that's when we had first started, dating and kind of getting serious in a relationship. So when she saw the opportunity of me moving out of the space I was in and the environment I was in, she thought for our relationship to go further, like this is going to have to be the next step.
And now you've progressed on to marriage and having kids. Because I'm just speaking from a very different experience, but I mean, from my parents are divorced. I've had my mum has had a step family. It's also, who she was divorced for the second time. The same, much similar to you. Does your view on how you want your family to be, do you reflect back on your childhood and say, okay, this is what I don't want, this is what I do want, and these are therefore the behaviors that I need to cultivate to be able to kind of secure this family unit?
Yeah, and it's been a very challenging. My son is 6. My oldest son's 6 and turning 7 this month, actually. And not having a real male father role model in my life growing up, it really didn't give me the opportunity to learn. This is my son here, actually. Yeah, buddy, I'm doing a show, okay? Go downstairs.
Very nice to meet you. Right on cue as well.
Yeah. This is Lucas. He actually is in school right now. He's on break. All right, buddy. I'll be all right. Yeah, so all right, bye, buddy. So not having a male role model growing up, I didn't know how to be a father. And that's scary. And when my wife was pregnant with him, it wasn't too concerning. I was like, oh, great, I'm having a kid. And then when he was born, I was just so scared. And I still probably mess up a lot. So I'm learning from scratch. I had mentioned my mom doesn't know her dad. My gram had a horrible relationship with her father. So there's just generation after generation of not having a male role model. And so I'm changing the behavior. Like
you're breaking that cycle, aren't you?
You're breaking that cycle.
Yeah.
And so yes, like I am still learning, and just anyone who comes from, even if you've had a father, a good mentor in your life, like you're still learning, but you have some foundational tools to work with. And that was part of my problem. I just didn't have the foundational tools to be a successful father, because when he was born and through much of his childhood, I still had a drinking problem, substance abuse problem. I mean, flash forward to, September 2020, or sorry, August 2020. That's when I decided to become sober. I had a very challenging 2020, and just like many other people, I was laid off from my job in March in 2020, and that's when I started drinking almost every day, starting in the morning sometimes.
Really.
Still going to therapy and everything, still on medication, but if you're taking medication and drinking, it's very counterintuitive.
Mm.
It's not going to work. Um, so my wife and I actually almost got separated and divorced this summer, and she pretty much made an ultimatum to me. It was, you either quit drinking or you lose your family. And you would think that that answer would be easy,
Yeah.
but when you're addicted to something,
Hmm.
that answer is not easy. Like
Mm.
that alcohol, like it just takes over your mind.
Mm.
So it took me, this was in July 2020. It took me about 2 months to finally quit. And I had been living up with my grandmother and mom up in Vermont, and she was down here in Boston. Um, so yeah, those were some challenging months to finally become sober, and I've been sober for close to 6 months now.
Well, I mean,
Um,
firstly, that's awesome. I mean,
yeah, thanks.
and I know that takes a huge amount of willpower, but also the fact that all this is so fresh. And I know that 2020 has been a hard time for a lot of people, and I think throughout the world, like this pandemic, and I know, the pandemic and the restrictions it brings a lot of other issues to the surface,
Yeah,
and it seems like there's been a lot of kind of crux and pivotal moments in a lot of people's relationships. Some haven't made it through, some have, and I'm so pleased to hear that, like you said, you took that ultimatum, you took it seriously, and you're like, no, I'm gonna do this. And my assumption is that staying sober is hard. Staying sober is hard for someone who is dependent.
yeah, it's extremely hard. I mean, sometimes if you just see a commercial on TV for
Mm.
alcohol, it gets you kind of thirsty, or
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
watching a movie and they're doing drugs, like
yeah.
you get that itch.
So are
And
you completely now nothing, absolutely nothing?
completely sober for
Yeah, yeah.
the last 6 months.
Good on you, man.
Um, I remember, thank you. Yeah, I remember back in August 2020, I was, and when sorry to kind of detour here, but when
No,
I
good.
initially started quitting, I was trying to, I was lying to myself because I started, instead of drinking beer that smelled like liquor,
Mm,
I would start drinking these hard seltzers that don't, when you drink them, your breath doesn't smell like alcohol.
okay.
So I could be around her and drink them,
Uh,
and she wouldn't know because
yeah,
I wouldn't smell her, but she could always tell in my eyes. So if I
yeah,
drank too much, I would only drink enough just to like get that, release of anxiety that I have, because I
yeah.
suffer from the reason why I drink is because of the anxiety and all that. Um,
So,
but I remember, and
yeah, yeah. Go on, carry on.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say on that point of anxiety. So now what happens when you get anxious? Because obviously, anxiety doesn't just go away. Like, you still have anxious
Yep.
situations. Like, how do you manage that?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not something that will ever go away. It will always be something that lives with me.
Mm,
It's I made a change. I remember August 14th of 2020, I was walking around a track and I was drunk, and I was like, you know what? I'm sick of living like this. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't live with the guilt. I can't live with being a bad father. I can't live with being this. I was completely out of shape. I'd
mm,
gained like 20 pounds. Um, I was smoking cigarettes at the time. So of
mhm.
course that makes you feel unhealthy. And I just texted my friend. He owns a gym in the town I was living with in Vermont, my hometown. I was like, I need to join your gym. Like, I need to start working out. Like, that was step one. Like, that text I sent him, along with, the journey of getting help through the mental health industry. But at this point, it had just accelerated to be so bad. Um, so I started doing fitness twice a week. And this was in, I didn't try to take on too much. And that's what's important when you're trying to improve. Like,
Yeah,
people will be like, I'm going to go work out 5 days a week. I'm going to run twice a week. I'm going to not eat any bad foods.
yeah,
I decided I'm just going to go and work out twice a week at this guy's gym. That's all I'm going to commit to right now.
yeah,
Right. Um, and then, so I'm building my tool belt, and I talk about this with Get Stung,
yeah.
is you have a tool belt, and you have your foundational tools, and the tools that I have right now are fitness.
Yeah.
I have meditation and yoga.
Yeah.
I do trail running.
Okay.
So
So,
those are
so,
my
so I'm thinking with trail running, just for those who don't know, that's out in the wilderness, right? That's out
Yep.
in nature.
Out in the wilderness, out in nature. And then and also therapy is a foundational tool for me. So
Yeah.
these are all tools that I can use
Yeah.
to help battle the anxiety and the depression and the bipolar illness that I have.
Mm,
And these weren't built overnight.
mm.
You know, I started with the fitness twice a week.
Yeah.
And then I started adding the trail running. And this is where I can kind of explain more about how Get Stung came about.
Mm.
Um, so I started trail running, and I would do this every Friday. And trail running in the mountains, Vermont is a very rural area with a
Yeah.
lot of mountains. So it's
Beautiful.
very, yeah, it's beautiful. It's hard to run in because there's a lot of hills. And I remember I texted a friend, he was living up in the area at the same time. I was like, let's meet every Friday morning at 6 a.m. and we're going to trail run.
Mhm.
And this is a friend of mine that will do anything with me. Like, if I'm telling him we're going to go hike Mount Everest, like, he'll be in my passenger seat car. And you need friends like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, who are going to do good things with you. And so we started doing that, and I'm out of shape. Like, I'm not in good shape at all. And just imagine running up hills and through the wilderness.
So hard.
And I was just so out of breath, so tired. But I remember I stopped, and I was like, man, this hurts. Like, this feels like I'm getting stung.
Mm.
But can I swear on this podcast?
You may.
But like I fucking love this pain. Like, this being this uncomfortable. Like, I felt so alive in that moment that it was like I was just getting stung by bees. And I'm not saying getting stung by a bee is fun, but
Yeah.
that's what it felt like. And
Yeah.
I felt so alive. Just think about if you get stung by a bee, you feel alive because all your senses are turned on. And I was like, I just want to get stung all the time and get uncomfortable and feel this pain, because it was like demons were just leaving my
Yeah.
body.
So actually it's interesting, because I think, like, you know, when you hear the word get stung, you kind of think of it as a negative, in terms of, like, you've got stung, like something's happened, like you might have broken up in your relation, you've got stung, you're hurt, you're pain, you know. But in the way that you turn that around into something more positive.
Yeah, you get stung. For the most part, when you get stung by something, unless it's, you know, deadly or whatever, like, you're gonna heal and you're gonna come back stronger each time.
Mm.
The more and more you get uncomfortable, the more you can grow as an individual through different challenges. And they don't have to just all be running through the woods, doing trail running. And your tool belt is going to challenge you to get stung almost every day. And it can be mentally or physically. So, you know, obviously the weightlifting I do is more physical, trail running physical, but then I have tools such as meditation, yoga, stretching. I do cold therapy. So taking cold showers, just going for a walk, or maybe going and doing some breath work for 5-10 minutes. Using the more and more tools you have, the more and more you can battle the anxiety and depression every single day. Because not every day you're going to go for a trail run. Not every day you're going to weightlift. So you can use different tools depending on how you feel that day, what you need. And like I said, you don't build this tool belt overnight. I started with the fitness. I added trail running, adding stretching, adding yoga, meditation, the cold therapy. And it's a rotating belt too.
Yeah.
You can bring a different tool up to the front and put one of the tools in the back. And you're learning new tools. So you're adding new tools too.
And
so
also,
it's fun. It's customized.
And also, like you said, I completely agree with you. And like, you know, some tools are relevant in certain situations and not in others. And it seems, but it seems it's so impressive, like how you've managed to achieve that. And if we go back to, let's say, when you first admitted on that night, I'm depressed. If you had that toolkit the day after, that wait for that therapy appointment would have been much different, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I look back now at that moment, the tools I had, the only tool I had was I worked in the fitness industry at the time. So I was working out, 2-3 times a week. But that's all I had. And the only other tools I had were alcohol, anger, like nothing positive.
Yeah.
And I had my tool belt. I didn't even have a belt. I had nothing, so.
And these things, like, okay, other than, let's say, a gym membership, right? How much do these things cost, right? They're free.
They're free. And people will say, I don't have time. Like and I understand people don't have a lot of time, but if you wake up earlier in the morning, or I had a great conversation with a friend, and he was saying, I'm not a morning person. Like, I don't want to get up in the morning. I'm an evening person. So I'm like, do those things in the evening. Like, you got to understand, like, don't force yourself to be a morning person. When you set yourself up to be successful, do them when they're good for you and you have the most energy. Right.
But I think the problem is that you've got, frankly, people don't make it their priority. If they're coming up with excuses and they're like, oh, I haven't got enough time, it's like, okay, like, the choice is, if you want to feel better, it's going to be hard work, and you've got to prioritize whatever you're doing. Whatever that goal is, it has to be your priority, because, and like, when you make it your priority, getting up at 6 a.m. to do a trail run doesn't become a chore anymore. It becomes something you actually really want to do.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm lucky I have the environment. I started having the environment around me. My friend who would show up every Friday morning
And that
at
really
6 a.m.
helps, doesn't it?
Yeah. And my wife, like, we were separated, but she knew I had to improve. So she gave me that space to like figure out what I needed to do to get better.
And in terms of that, your relationship now, I assume you've had to work on, your relationship. You're now, like you said, you're now a father. You've gone through a period of difficulty within that relationship, and I assume, like you said, you want to be a better, a better partner, better husband.
Yeah, I mean, we're in marriage counseling, so we've been in marriage counseling for probably about 2 months, which has helped greatly.
Brilliant.
And just with me going to a therapist as well, weekly, and talking. I recently switched my therapist in the last 2 months. My original therapist was great. She got me to where I was, but she couldn't take me. I kind of grew out of her, so I found a new one who was really helping me kind of take that next step. And I've started this podcast, and she really talks me through a lot of things. And I mean, you just got to surround yourself with the right people, and you get just caught up in the wrong things. And but I mean, our relationship has been improving, and we got a lot of work to do. It will never stop working. Like, relationships are, whether it's your wife, whether it's your coworker, whether it's your son, whatever, relationships are one of the hardest things in everyday life.
And if you want to make it work, you've got to make it a priority. Like, you can't just be with someone, either married, unmarried, but if you're in a long-term commitment with someone, it doesn't just stop. It's not like it's a contract where you just exist. Like, you're changing all the time, and your relationship goes under strain points. I mean, God, in a pandemic with kids push you to the limit.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
and you just, like, if you want to grow and you want to continue and you don't want to end up being divorced, then you're gonna have to work at it. And I think it's, you've got to make it your priority.
Kids consume your time, and they take away from your relationship, and it's so important to be able to find time for your partner and just yourself too. I mean, to grow and be better for them. Like, they consume so much of your energy,
Yeah.
It's hard.
But I think like, your mental health toolkit is exercise focused. That has got to help with the energy levels that you need to kind of give to your kids, right?
100%. I mean, I would say anyone who's starting out on a mental health journey and trying to improve, like, fitness should definitely be a tool. And it's not
Yeah.
doesn't have to be going to the gym 5 days a week.
Mm,
Fitness can be going for a walk.
yeah, yeah,
Fitness can be, just maybe lifting weights 2 times a week for 30 minutes, whatever it is.
yeah,
Like, this tool belt is customized.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not a one size fits all. And
yeah,
in Instagram and social media makes fitness look so hard.
yeah.
But
It's not.
it's overwhelming. Like,
Yeah,
walking into a gym, you see all these fit people.
yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be that,
Mm.
Um,
And I
just
think, like you said, on the trail running perspective, there's something about going outside and out into the kind of into the forest, onto the, for us living in London, onto the commons, onto the parks, being outside in nature and taking a walk,
yeah,
it does wonders. And
yeah,
it really, you don't have to step into a gym. If you don't like a gym, that's absolutely fine. But I
yeah,
think, Justin, what you're saying is like, actually there's a real benefit of having some form of active lifestyle, even if it is just walking. But getting outside and walking is a great start to your mental health toolkit. It's a great habit to be in.
yeah. And I think just over the summer, the one main relationship I really worked on outside of my wife and my children was my relationship with Earth,
Mm,
and just being connected to it, and how much, like, if you go out trail running, you're gonna appreciate
yeah.
Earth and the inclines, and and those trails are hard. You're gonna be like, wow, Earth is kicking my ass every time I come out here. So you start respecting it.
Yeah,
It humbles you,
yeah.
and you just become so appreciative of the Earth.
Yeah, and something that we take for granted, it's a free resource. And
Yeah,
I know there are in many countries where we exploit that free resource, but you can exploit it in a negative way. You can exploit it in a positive way. If, like you said, if you respect nature, and you respect, and you're in awe of it as well. Like you said, I'm sure around you there's some hills, there's even some mountains. The scale of these natural phenomena are immense, and it can really be very humbling. Just sitting, being on top of a cliff or being at the bottom of a mountain, just realizing that we are very, very small,
yeah,
and we can only, and in that is really, it's really empowering. We have to accept that we are small. We can accept that
yeah,
we can't control everything, and we can frankly prioritize what we want to achieve and only do our best.
yeah.
And if you get to the end of every day where you've done that, personally, I think that's a really good start. Start to the day, start to the week, and start to much more positive mental health.
Yeah, and it's so great too. I take my kids out
Mm,
into the wilderness now, and it's a great way for me to connect with them.
yeah,
And it's almost like Earth is almost like a therapist between me and my kids. They're
yeah,
bringing us back together, to be more close. And
yeah.
um so yeah, I can't yeah, I'm so appreciative of Earth, and the suffering it has put me through, and all
Yeah.
this running. And yeah, I love it.
And it's led you to that positive place. I mean, yeah, Justin, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating to talk through, like, the first 34 years and the context in which your mental health struggles kind of really emerged, and then, frankly, a really short, intense period where
Yeah.
you have recovered in a way that now, like you said, you're 6 months sober. You are in a much better place in your relationship. Um, in terms of your relationship with other things, in terms of outside exercise, sounds like you're in a really positive place, and you are documenting this, on your journey on your Get Stung podcast, and really living that mantra of getting stung in a really positive way. So honestly, thank you so much for your time on this.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on and allowing me to talk about this. Every time I talk about this, I feel better, and I'm moving in the right direction. So
Well, it
um
well, it certainly sounds like you are. So
yeah.
amazing work.
Yeah.
Justin,
Uh,
thank you so much for your time.
yeah, thank you. Take care.
And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just search for Sidekick Community or Sidekick Stories and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show. And if you like some of the things that Justin was talking about, check out our free Sidekick app for iPhone and iPad. It's a collection of interactive exercises, tools and tips to help you boost your mental well-being. The app enables you to build a personalized well-being toolkit to help you deal with life's ups and downs. Just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, and click the Download Now button in the header to take you to the App Store. Justin, thank you so much again.